Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I really enjoyed that conversation with Britt. It was just a great example of so many dedicated people at the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and you could just hear the passion in his voice as he talked about each of those lakes. What a pleasure it is. Hey, we're gonna in just a second we're gonna move over to Steve Reno Moore and talk about what's going on with his handgun classes and all of that. But before we do, you may have seen a social media post recently that was actually fake. And if you go to supertalk.fm or to the SuperTalk Mississippi app, you will see a story that says wildlife officials urge public to ignore fake social media posts about new hunting rules. And it was written by Caleb Sellers, one of our terrific news guys as part of that SuperTalk Mississippi news team. But here's essentially what the story says. Wildlife officials in Mississippi are warning the public about an imposter sharing false information online. A social media post intentionally designed to mimic the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks recently took to the internet to post that baiting and feeding will be allowed on all public hunting land during the 25-26 hunting season. That account is fake and does not represent the state agency authorities report. The information is false and did not come from the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. A statement from the department reads, official hunting regulations and announcements are only released through the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks verified channels, including our website and official social media accounts. We encourage hunters to always verify information directly from the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks before sharing. And it goes on to say, what the fines are if you get caught doing it. So don't think it's okay, because it's not. And if you know someone who is saying that it's now legal, send them to SuperTalk Mississippi app or to supertalk.fm and see this story or share this story with them. So we got to clear that up, or there's going to be some people caught doing some bad things. Okay, now let's shift gears. If I look back during the time I've had this show, one of the most enjoyable I had was with Steve Moore. His nickname is Reno, and he is a incredible handgun instructor. He's been doing it for quite a while. He was a protege of a guy named Colonel Jeff Cooper from Gunsight. For people who don't know who he is, you ought to know who he is. And as I said to Reno before we started the show, it's great street cred that he was a protege of Colonel Cooper. But without any further ado, let me welcome Reno Moore back to Super Talk Outdoors. How you doing, Reno?
Doing fine. Good morning to you. Good to be back.
Hey, can you believe it's been 2022 since we last visited? It seems like yesterday in some respects.
It does. We must be getting older, because time really does fly on us.
Yeah. How have you been? You doing good?
Been doing pretty good. A few things are breaking down, but that's to be expected with age.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you, man. I hear you. I feel the same way. I did mention, you were the protege of Colonel Jeff Cooper of Gunsight. It's quite unfortunate that people who enjoy, especially handguns or shooting sports, that they would not know who Jeff Cooper is. So why don't we remind them real quick and why that's important?
Colonel Cooper was the father of the modern technique. If you shoot with two hands on your handgun, if you really do use what he called the Weaver stance, or even if you're still a little bit archaic and use some of the different stances like the isosceles or offshoots of the isosceles, all modern shooting techniques really came from him. They gravitated from him. I know they split off a little bit over time, and that's what normally happens. But the guy was just a genius, an intellectual. He was also wealthy, so he could afford the time and had the ability to actually put together a school that they call Gunsight. Now they term it Gunsight Academy. Owen Buzz Meal owns and operates it now. He's got a great CEO, Ken Campbell, that runs it for him. And Gunsight is still proliferating. They'll be coming up next year on their 50th anniversary. But he really is the father or the progenitor of the modern technique of the pistol. He also taught rifles and shotguns, and he loved rifles probably even more than pistols. But where he really pushed the edge of capabilities is with the fighting handgun. And really, He called himself a teacher. We called him the guru. But if you're a gunfighter, or if you depend on your gun, your handgun for a living, I'm telling you, you need to know who he was.
So, Reno, when you think about having been a protege to Colonel Cooper, what did that mean to you? And how did that change your entire trajectory of your career?
Oh, it's amazing to me. I don't know that, my association with him, gave me any cred with any job I got. But at the time, I'd gone through the Navy 10 years as a helicopter pilot. I joined the government service. I was overseas working in the Middle East. We were hunting down bad guys. And I'd already used my handgun to defend myself or attack people several times. I really thought I knew what I was doing. And I read the book written by Colonel Cooper. He wrote several of them, but my favorite is called To Ride, Shoot Straight, and Speak the Truth. And I read that book, and other than the Bible, that's my favorite book in the whole world, because that guy thought exactly like I did. I couldn't see a hair's difference between any opinion he expressed in that book and the way I thought either. So my feeling was I need to meet this guy. So in the back of the book, it had the telephone number to Gunsight. So I called it up, and who and behold, answered the phone with Colonel Jeff Cooper. He didn't introduce himself as that. I found that out later. But I told him, I said, I'd like to meet Colonel Cooper. Is there any way I can do that? And then roughly he said, take the course. And I asked him what course. He informed me, the 250 course. And I said, how do I do that? He says, give me your address. I did. And he said, you'll have a packet coming in the mail. And that's the way I got introduced to Colonel Cooper. When I showed up for the course, I tell you what, he was really kind of rough, tough, and rough on the outside, but a veritable genius. It took him 30 seconds of his opening lecture to dispel me of the notion that I knew anything worth knowing about handgun shooting. And it went from there. And I mean, it is amazing what he was able to impart in just 5 days. It really was. Just totally changed my outlook on using the handgun, how effective it could be, and how to employ it. And then also, as time went on, how to teach it to others. I went back to Saudi Arabia, and we had a SEAL team there that I was working with. I was a helicopter pilot, but they had a pistol course. And I said, hey, you guys mind if I run the pistol course? And I was about 3 weeks away from Gunsight after I graduated, and I maxed out their pistol course. And they looked at me, and they're like, how did you do that? And after I explained to them about Gunsight, the next thing I knew, there were about 3 master chiefs that were heading over to meet Colonel Cooper and take his class. And from that point on, the SEALs, all of their instructors for a period of time, used to go to Gunsight to pick up the expertise that he had to offer. Not just pistols, but submachine guns, rifles, and to a certain extent, shotguns too.
What
amazing
a great
man.
Story. Yeah, the SEAL team connection is so fascinating to me. But it's amazing that this man would have something that the military could learn from.
I tell you what, they've sent so many people out there in the past that they just go out now, I think a few of them, to refresh themselves and make sure that their curriculum is pretty much on line with gun sites. But the colonel used to give them the curriculum for free. If you were a government agency, be it local law enforcement or national agency like the FBI, but the FBI is pretty much they're still in the dark ages. That they kind of refuse to change. They're another bureaucracy that's kind of stuck in the mud, so to speak. But I'm telling you, SEAL teams, Special Forces, Army, parajumpers, Air Force. I mean, I got to meet a lot of them out there and then overseas in my duty and work there too. But it's amazing. The colonel, and they still do it. Once you take a course out there and complete it, you can see it considered to be part of what they call the Gunsight family. And it's amazing how many Gunsight family members I've run into over the years. It's just amazing. They're all over the place.
It sounds so interesting. We're coming kind of to the end of this segment, but you started with the department in 2011, and for the past 10 years, you've been teaching handgun classes. One of the interesting things, Reno, about sitting in this job is that every week I end the show by talking about safety. That some of the worst accidents happen with people who have been doing it forever. They just kind of drop their guard or forget to do something. But some of the, sadly, some bad accidents happen with guns. But I get to hear about the near misses. Nearly a disaster happening. because somebody forgot to put a gun on safety, or forgot that, when they shot the deer, that they put another one inside the chamber, and were so excited they forgot to put the safety on. And then later, as they were getting onto their four-wheeler, they brushed the trigger and the gun goes off, and thank God nobody was hit. But you can never be too old to be reminded about the importance of safety. And you've been doing this for 10 years, certainly around handgun classes, but you think about what's happening at our shooting ranges. We'll remind people we have some of the best shooting ranges around within the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks arena, but safety cannot be overstated. And when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Reno Moore, and we'll get into some of the work that he's actually doing these days with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. We're visiting today for this segment with Steve Reno Moore. He's been teaching handgun classes since 2015. He's been with the department since 2011. The Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks puts a lot of focus on training. As I mentioned, the shooting range, whether it be MacGyver or Turcotte or McHenry, what they've done over the years to make those like world class is truly remarkable. But I ended that segment, though, by saying, Reno, that some of the interesting stories, sad stories, but near miss stories that I hear constantly being in this chair, people, when I end the show, saying, please always put safety first. Please never drop your guard. I just preach that. And what that does is it spurs people who send me notes and tell me their stories. But it's so important that we always be reminded that we can never drop our guard when it comes to gun safety, can we?
No, sir. No, sir, not at all. Complacency will sneak up on anybody. And unfortunately, the more you carry a gun, the more you hunt with a weapon, the easier it is for complacency to bite you. And it will sooner or later if you're not careful.
You've heard some stories.
We teach in every one of our courses, we actually teach Cooper's 4 rules. We've adopted them as our own, but I still like to attribute them where credit is due. But they're the 4 rules they still use out of gun sight. The first rule is all guns are always loaded. Treat them that way. And when he said treat them that way, he really meant it. And he meant all guns, including your own, and including the one your buddy's trying to show you, including the one you're seeing in the gun shop. But always loaded. Treat them that way. If they did that, so many of those negligent discharges would not occur. And we wouldn't hear about the so-called accidents and people wouldn't be getting hurt or killed. He even told me one time, he says, Reno, he said, I know I've got 4 rules, but of all of them, he says, there's a reason I made that number 1. If people would treat all guns the way they're loaded all of the time, he says, we just wouldn't have near as many problems with them as they do. And then the second one comes in, rule number 2. It's like, never let the muzzle cover anything you're not willing to destroy. If you don't point a gun at something, it's not going to blow a hole in it if you screw up and make a mistake. That's really an easy one to follow, but it's one people violate all the time because they just unconsciously don't do it correctly. The third one is one of my favorites there. Keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on the target. And I see that violated every day I go out to the range or anytime I go hunting. And I don't know what to attribute it to other than the fact that all of us played with toy guns when we were little, whether it was a squirt gun or a cap gun or a spring-loaded stopper gun or, latter days airsoft, Nerf pistols or whatever. But, the first time we picked it up and every time we picked it up, where did your finger go? If you're going to squirt your brother in the ear with that, you had your finger on it because you thought it'd take less time. And I try to teach little kids, I don't care how old they are, when they're small, to keep their finger off that trigger until they're ready to squirt somebody or whatever. But we've established horrible habit patterns as children growing up. And then when we get to be adults, we're not aware that bad habit is lurking in our minds, just waiting to come out. And if you don't write over that memory and really train hard, then you're going to make that mistake and your finger is going to be on that trigger when you don't want it to. And so rule number 3 is something in the classes I try to highlight and try to explain why we make that mistake. But if you're aware of it, you're on the road to start to keep doing it. And then the last one, of course, is always be sure of your target and what lies beyond your target. Not just when you're practicing, which is very important, which is why we have our 3 ranges in the north, central, and southern part of our state. But it's also important if you get into a self-defense situation or if you're in a hunting situation as well. We're about to start dove hunting again. And how many times have you heard of somebody that got shot when they were hunting? Whether, somebody was chasing a bird too low, or they just weren't paying attention, or they just negligently let their finger go in an area it shouldn't have. But these 4 rules, we preach them down at hunting camp. We preach them before every class, and they work.
What's interesting is that goes for BB gun too. Some fathers will let kids go off with a BB gun, and in my family, we treat BB guns like a loaded, deer rifle, because that's when you're starting to learn some of those habits. It
sounds crazy to start out with a squirt gun and be telling children to be careful with it, but it's all about habit patterns, and that subconscious mind can bite you.
Not good.
Never too early.
I'm remiss that we're running out of time, but one of the things I'm going to do is have you back, and I want to get into some of the work that you're doing in teaching these handgun classes. I want to get your view about what's happening at MacGyver and Turcotte and McHenry. We're so lucky to have those places, aren't we?
Oh, we're blessed. I mean, really, it goes beyond luck. And it takes a lot of hard work. The guys that do the work out there to keep those ranges up are splendid. The range officers, the range program managers, I mean, you couldn't ask for more, It's amazing. Joey, Todd, Ricky. I wish Ricky could be here with us today, but he had a knee injury he had to take care of.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I can tell your passion for what you're doing. And when you talked about those 4 items around gun safety, I mean, if everyone could just drive that into their brains and teach the people around them to do the same thing, man, it would be a lot safer place that we're in, and frankly would have less accidents at the end of the day. But until we meet again, which won't be too long, we'll have you back on soon. Steve, Reno, Moore, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you again.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Listen, have a great week. We'll see you next Monday. And as I always end every show, and especially today, always put safety first. Don't ever take anything for granted. God bless you. See you Monday.